Hello, everyone. Today we're here with Dr. RT, and the reason why I invited Dr. RT was many of us struggle with sleep. And when it comes to autoimmune conditions and when it comes to the gut, that all these things are related, and people just don't realize that sleep has a lot to do with the gut, a lot to do with the hormones, and even stress. And I would love for RT to share her personal story around sleep and why you decided to specialize in sleep.
Thanks, Swetha, for having me on. Appreciate it. So yeah, my struggle began a couple years ago. Like I think most people who, stress is a big contributing factor to people having sleep issues. And I think one thing that happens in our society, especially with women, is that we're taught to just go, 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 and make sure everyone else is okay, and we're last essentially. And these signs and symptoms can go a little bit unnoticed because we've also normalized stress in our society. And so, it's normal for everyone who they're like, oh, I should be running around. I should be like doing 10,000 million things and not taking any time for myself. And, that can result in what we call hypothalamus pituitary adrenal dysfunction. Okay. And this also impacts how the thyroid functions. And so sleep disturbance can be a result of that whole axis. So from the brain to the body being dysregulated. So in a beautiful world, your brain and your adrenals and your thyroid, they work together like a symphony. And so there's always a nice feedback mechanism that happens. Now, when you're stressed for long periods of time, I like to always think of it as like this kind of this vertical pole, if you will, like the hypothalamus, so the brain here, and then like adrenal here, thyroid's in between. And when we've been stressed for long periods of time, so it can be emotional stress, it can be overnight stress such as sleep apnea, it can be environmental stress, it can be toxic stress, chemical stress, emotional stress. So all of those stressors, it doesn't matter what it is, okay, is going to have the same effect on the body. It's pounding on it and it's starting to dysregulate. Now, when you're stressed, our body is still wired like our ancestors. So we interpret it as like we've got to run away from the tiger, okay? And so, the hormone that goes up during that time is cortisol. And so when you're running all the time, we were only meant to do that for short periods of time. Run away from the tiger, the others got saved or you were tiger meat. So 15-minute, short periods of time. But in our society, what's happening is that it is 24/7. And if you're doing this 24/7, that is so depleting to your hormones. It is so depleting to your neurotransmitters. You're never getting into repair mode. So our body works in both sympathetic and parasympathetic mode, parasympathetic meaning the rest and digest mode. If you're never getting into that mode, you're never healing your gut overnight. You're never healing your hormones overnight. You're never healing your emotions overnight. So that's how sleep, I started to put these things together, given my own experience. So, it took a while. Like I had to, use functional medicine concepts and some testing and to figure out, okay, I was in stage 1 adrenal dysregulation, which is fight or flight all the time. I'm lucky I caught myself actually that early, but there are different stages, stage 2, stage 3, that people can progress onto if it's going on for long periods of time. So that can be a cortisol. I think we had kind of discussed this earlier where, cortisol should start high in the morning and go low as the day goes on. But people with hypothalamus pituitary adrenal dysregulation, the cortisol can spike at nighttime. The pattern goes wacky, which can contribute to sleep issues, which can impact people with autoimmune issues.
Wow. So, I mean, when you work with people, you get to the root cause, and that's what
yes.
I do, because you're not just like, let me give you a pill for this and you'll be done.
It will never be fixed that way. It will never be fixed that way.
And even when I had Hashimoto's, I realized that my problem was the adrenals. Like, because all the years of taking high doses of prednisone, my adrenals suffered. And it caused the Hashimoto's, the thyroid numbers to be off balance. And once I started healing my adrenals, my thyroid levels went back to normal.
Beautiful.
So, but you know, it's like, and the adrenal gland also controls the androgens and also the cortisol. So I know a lot of people, you know, dealing with hair loss related to stress, it could be that as well.
Absolutely. You make a amazing point. So people in this period where you kind of mentioned that out of the adrenal glands comes your sugar, your salt, your sex, and your stress hormones. And so if you're stressed constantly, all of your goods go to cortisol. So not as much goes to your sex hormones. So this can show up as infertility, low libido, like severe PMS, like if you're more menopausal, awful, you know, menopausal symptoms like hot flashes, sweating, irritability, you know, you're peeing all the time because you can't keep your salt in and water in. So there's multiple symptoms that people may not necessarily put together as hormonal imbalance, but it is.
Wow. And in terms of like the gut and like being able to sleep, how are they correlated and what's sort of the fix for that?
Sure. So the gut can, you know, you're familiar with this, but the gut is where everything begins essentially, right? It is your barrier to the outside world, you know, in terms of taking in, you know, you're exposed to toxins and chemicals. It's there to, you know, kind of make them more water soluble and then you excrete them. Now we're really exposed to a lot of chemicals and processed foods and things like that these days, that and stress that can impact how the gut functions. And so if this is your barrier, it now starts to become leaky. And now stuff is leaking into your bloodstream that shouldn't be there. And so then your immune system starts to go, boom, you know, alarm system, as does cortisol. So then if cortisol is spiking to tell your system like, hey, there's an infection going on, that can disrupt how your sleep is, like how you sleep. And so the root would be to like figure out what is causing that leaky gut. So that can be food intolerances, it can be infection, it can be dysbiosis, meaning imbalance between good and bad bacteria in the gut. Multiple, yeah, like so you would want to make sure that there's none of those stuff is going on.
Wow. And like when they sleep, like it's like 8 to 10 hours of like really good sleep means no disturbances, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like,
So yeah, the sweet spot that we're seeing is around 7 to 9, but our ancestors, you know, they used to sleep around nine hours.
wow, that's a lot of hours.
It's a lot of hours, yeah. But I always say when I'm teaching people, it's like, think about it from an ancestral health perspective. When the sun went down, you know, and the moon would come up, that was a trigger for melatonin. We have artificially increased daylight with our lights and blue light, especially in the last 15 to 20 years. That has really messed our hormones up. And when it's messing your hormones up, it messes your immunity up because you're not getting that quality sleep that you need.
And you mentioned melatonin. How do you feel about melatonin and supplements that aid sleep?
So melatonin is fine only in the short period and like for short periods of time. Long periods of time of melatonin supplementation is not good because if you look at the pathway, our body works in feedback mechanisms. So whenever you give the end product, it's never going to go through the cycle of making it, okay? So it's tryptophan, 5-HTP, serotonin, melatonin. Now, if you always give melatonin, you're never going to go through that pathway and make serotonin, which helps you with your mood and eventually also sleep. But so long-term melatonin use is associated with depression. So I like it as a short-term only and give it with a little bit of 5-HTP, which is a precursor, so that you're keeping everything balanced. And eventually my goal is never for people to be on this stuff long-term, it's really to come off of it.
I see. But as you age, don't you reduce your production of melatonin?
You do, but I still don't think, because there's also been association of like decreased size of the pineal gland with melatonin supplementation. So I think also it's honoring what happens naturally with nature. Like we were wired a certain way, we've evolved a certain way. Stick with that, because it just, you know, sometimes if you do too much, it kind of mucks with you long term.
So what's like considered short-term use, and usually like what's like a good dosage?
So up to 3 milligrams is what I do, and it's sublingual, so it gets into your system much faster. If you take oral, I don't even use oral, to be honest, in our practice, because it has to go through the digestive tract, and you know, how much are you actually absorbing? And so when you're ready to go to bed, you're ready to go to bed. So that's why I like the sublingual. Up to 3 milligrams. And then I give it with a little bit of a cream, which is 5-HTP. Always check with your doctor. None of this stuff is medical advice for anyone, but I'm just telling you what we do. And in our clinic, we really use a rehabilitative approach where we go into every nook and cranny and look at nutritional deficiencies, infections, whatever. And then we start building people back up project by project. So the goal eventually is actually not to be on supplements when you leave us.
I love that. I love working with doctors that like prefer not to be on anything.
Yeah, like they're tools. They're tools. But at the end of the day, it's like you got to reteach your body also how to behave, because when it's been dysregulated for so long, it doesn't know. But then also, if you're on stuff too long, then it may not even know how to extract nutrients from food anymore if you're constantly giving it everything.
That's true. And that's with anything, I would think, right? Like you take an adrenal supplement, thyroid supplement, you know, people take a lot of supplements, and I'm always amazed that, you know, they keep taking them even if they don't feel the difference. And a lot of women come to me and they're like, you know, I eat a clean diet, I'm taking all these supplements, and I'm like, but what if they're not absorbing?
Absolutely. And sometimes actually, I think people are so scared because, again, it goes back to that pill for every ill. That mentality also gets shifted even into the integrative world. I feel like even though you're treating the root cause, that mentality is still there. So it's still like, you still got to fix the other lifestyle issues also, if you really want to like set yourself up for good health long term.
I see. And when it comes to like lifestyle, do you work with a lot of patients who come in with autoimmune issues and like Hashimoto's?
Mm-hmm.
What?
All the time.
Wow. Where do you start?
So, we look at nutritional deficiencies, we look at blood work. So we're looking at all the antibodies, not just for Hashimoto's, but also for like lupus or rheumatoid arthritis and scleroderma. So we're really ruling out to see like, how bad is this autoimmunity going on? Okay. For like, what we're trying to understand is, okay, so the immune system is dysregulated. We look at, is methylation an issue because of this? Usually for most people it is. A lot of people are under methylators. And so we look at methylation pathways, we look at genetics, we look at the whole adrenal axis, diet. So we have a dietitian also who counsels people for 2 hours, when they first come in.
Wow.
Yeah. So we're, by the time people get to us, they're like falling apart. So, it takes a while to like build them back up, but we're methodical, go project by project. So we're also looking at mitochondria. Like, are they tanked? Because if your mitochondria are tanked, you can't do anything. They're the energy producing organelles of the cell. So.
And is all of this stuff done virtually, or is it mostly in-house?
So the only time we require people to come in is for their physical. The rest they can do virtually. So we have telemedicine set up for that.
That's incredible, because I think, sleep is where all of this stuff starts. So usually when you're not able to sleep well, there's something going on that's causing that. And a lot of the women that are in my organization, they tell me that they have the sleeping pattern of they go to sleep at 3 a.m. and then they have a hard time waking up in the morning at like 9 or whatever time it is. And it's not just like one person, but it's many people. And is this something that you see um, pretty common in your practice?
Absolutely, because what's happened is likely, I'm assuming most of these people have been like, these women have been like this for a long time. Think of it, you've pounded on the system, hormones are depleted, neurotransmitters are depleted. So it's kind of this catch-22 where if your hormones are depleted, like progesterone, okay, that is very calming to the nervous system. If you're depleted, you're gonna have a hard time sleeping. If you're depleted in your like serotonin and GABA, you're also going to have a hard time sleeping. So one thing to like put things together is if you have like a high cortisol for a long period of time, eventually it'll go low, right? Because you don't have like an infinite supply of hormones, right? Like eventually the body tanks. But cortisol, when it's high for long periods of time, it spends your norepinephrine, epinephrine, it spends your serotonin, it spends your GABA. So just putting it together that, okay, it's essentially my cup is getting depleted.
Right. And when you measure the cortisol, a lot of the doctors I've worked with, okay, they're either for the 4-point cortisol test or totally against it and just do the blood test.
Uh-huh.
How do you effectively measure cortisol?
I think I'm a fan of the 4-point saliva test because oftentimes you will see in the blood, it looks normal. And so I think we catch a lot more with the 4-point saliva test. And also your cortisol changes throughout the day. So if you only look at it at one time point, yeah, you might catch it at normal, but then it's something might get missed is the thing.
I see. And so is that where you usually start with when you kind of see like the sleep is off, there's something going on, and it starts with the cortisol usually?
Usually, yeah. So it's not necessarily the first thing we'll treat because first you got to fix nutritional deficiencies first. So that takes a little bit of time. So we give people some like stuff to take the edge off, but we don't go full blown into treating adrenals because that's a several month project. If you don't have a strong foundation with nutrition, it's not going to work.
Right.
And stick. You're putting so much effort into your treatment. You want it to stick. You know, I've learned a lot from my mentor because he's been in the field for so long that, you know, you got to do piece by piece, especially with women who have been struggling for a long time.
That's so true. I think to really build a good foundation, I remember like even with me, I felt like I rebuilt my whole entire dysfunctional body.
Yeah.
And I had to like detox everything. And then I kind of just started from scratch. And I know a lot of people do keto. I know a lot of people do all these different diets, but the only thing that really worked for me was an anti-inflammatory diet and eating like 3 meals a day. I mean, it's the same thing that people did in the caveman days that people today are like, I don't know, they're not aware of. And almost
I think, yeah, you make a really good point because I think we're exposed to food 24/7 and, you know, there's people who are like, you need to eat every 2 hours to keep your metabolism up and everyone's obsessed with weight loss, so they'll do that. But the thing is, like, I agree with you. I think it's go back to the basics. That's actually key to good health. And I know people are like, it can look like you're super disciplined, but I'm like, you're actually working with your body's physiology. And when you work with your body's physiology, then you will automatically create health.
That's so true. And I think, you know, with my sleep problems, I always thought, you know, something's going on in my gut because the food I was eating was not digesting. And a lot of the women that I've worked with, they wanted to know, how do you know, like, if your food is digesting or not, you know, and that's also been an issue. And is that related to sleep?
It can be, absolutely, because if you've got some inflammation going on with not digesting your food, which can show up as indigestion, like you're bloating, or you have pain after eating, or you have reflux, or you feel extremely tired after eating, those can be some signs that you're not digesting your food well. And especially if you're not having regular bowel movements that are nice and formed, that can also tell you that your digestion is off. And so if that's creating inflammation, inflammation is like kind of fire for the brain, because the gut and the brain are connected. And so inflammation is going to keep you up.
Right. And when you talk about inflammation, what are the ways that your clinic sort of helps patients get rid of inflammation so they can sleep better?
Sure. So it's going back to looking at what are all the stressors that are breaking down the system. So again, looking at is environmental issues like mold, or, you know, for some people, mercury, right? Like looking them out, a lot of people have amalgams that have been put in, and that can be a source of inflammation, or root canals or infections in the mouth. Sleep apnea, that's a big one. If you want me to, like, we catch it all the time. And even, you know, people have this stereotypical view of like the obese patient with a really thick neck. If you're constitutionally weak, you cannot keep your airway open. We catch it in like the tiniest, you know, women and stuff. And so if you're grinding your teeth, or you're clenching, or you're waking up feeling toxic, or you have a headache, you should really get sleep apnea ruled out, because we catch it all the time. And I will tell you, like, even when I was super stressed out going through that time period, I was like, I don't have sleep apnea, you know, like cocky, you know, like I'm a physician. I know, like, I tested myself, because I put myself through everything that we put our patients through. Sure enough, I had sleep apnea for that time. It was mild, but it was still there. And that's, you know, a stressor you're undergoing every night, and that's depleting. So, you know, for what we do is look at all the stressors and then address each stressor. It could be infection in the gut, so I was continuing with those. And then emotional stuff. Trauma comes up all the time, and I will tell you, with trauma and autoimmunity, there's sometimes like a pretty big correlation that we've just, I don't know, clinically seen. So if you don't even deal with that unresolved trauma, it shows up later in life. And so that would be the other thing.
That's so true. I know a lot of the women I've worked with, I kind of have been sort of that friend for them, or someone that they can turn to, because a lot of them feel alone, and they felt like they weren't good enough in the past, and a lot of traumatic situations. So I think that's a big issue, as well, as to be able to face that and accept it and sort of heal. And
Absolutely.
Part of my healing, I know, was helping other people heal. And that's when I knew I was like almost done healing.
That's beautiful. That's so beautiful. Because I think the way I think about it too is like this thing where I'm saying pounding on the stressor, trauma will do the same thing. Even though it's not happening to you still, it's like hidden there, like from the past, and it keeps your nervous system in this fight or flight state.
And I think a lot of people don't even realize that that's an issue.
No, not at all.
So, and like looking at your story, you know, it started with you wanting to sort of deal with stress and fix that problem. How did you go about fixing your own sleep issues?
Sure. So initially, like, I'm so thankful, like I didn't have like overt like infections or anything like that going on. So I'm really, really thankful. I caught myself early. But, you know, I first started with herbs that helped calm the adrenals down. So stuff that's been used for centuries, like in Ayurvedic medicine, so adaptogens. So I started to calm my nervous system down first with that. And then I did grounding, which is like totally going to sound woo-woo, but I don't know if you've heard of it or not. But grounding is something that helps with, like, human beings were wired to be outside. And so we were always in contact with the earth, which has an electromagnetic frequency. So whenever we walked on the earth and our skin is conductive, we were in contact with that frequency, which is calm, cool, collected. So it helped bring me kind of more in balance that way. And then I felt a little bit better and calmer. Then I honed in on a yoga practice, which then totally changed my life, has like, you know, made me a lot happier. My perception on things has changed. So really got into like, you know, active conscious breathing, which can hack the nervous system. And when you hack the nervous system and more into parasympathetic mode, that is where healing happens.
I love that. I love your ground. I have to try it.
Yeah. So what I did was, you can't, I mean, in our modern day, we can't really spend a lot of time outside. So they've actually created these grounding mats, which I totally thought was a like woo-woo thing. And like, I was like, these are just people trying to make money. But then I looked into the studies and I was like, after a year, because I was still struggling. And then I was like, oh my God, I think there's something here. So I looked into the studies and I was like, okay, I have nothing to lose. I'm going to try it. And then literally like the first night I slept through the night. I think I only woke up once, but I woke up refreshed, which had not happened in 2.5 years.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only disclaimer I have for grounding is that if you're super, super weak, or like you've been sick for a while, or you're really sensitive to supplements, you should go low and slow. Don't go directly 8 hours on a mat. You will detox. You will make yourself feel worse, especially if you're on medications. You got to be careful. So again, like just a treatment option out there, but always check with your doctor.
Love that. I mean, it's all about bringing peace in your life in some way or form. And I know that when I was in Egypt, I worked with, like, he was almost like he read palms for a living. And at first I thought it was also like voodoo type of stuff. I'm like, oh, what is this class all about? And I took it anyways. And he goes, you know, I really think you're supposed to master peace in your life. And
oh my gosh.
And I was like, you know, you're right. Like, I think I've been like on this go, go, go. Like I had all this anxiety. Like I would always be like wanting things on time. You know, I worked in Silicon Valley where it's kind of like you are just a number and you have to perform. Otherwise you're out, and it's a complete rat race there. So I was like, you know, maybe this whole illness has been trying to teach me how to master peace in my life. And like, just
that's what I feel. That's exactly what I feel.
You know, but I love the adaptogens that you mentioned as well. I used to take Triphala, ashwagandha. I took Google, and I think all those sort of help cleanse the body, right?
Absolutely. And, you know, they're Ayurvedic herbs. So, you know, I got really into kind of understanding kind of the Ayurvedic perspective. And I'm like, the more, you know, when you read about Ayurveda, I don't know if your followers are familiar with it or not, but, you know, it's based on concepts of like earth and wind and fire and all those things that we have. And it sounds totally woo-woo, but then like when you actually sit there and like kind of study it, and then you study the people in your life, you're like, huh, it actually does start to make sense. Like, so for me, I was really air imbalanced. I had moved around quite a bit. Like, these are the creative people, but then out of balance are anxious, have insomnia, things like that. So what do they need? They need more grounding to keep them more in balance. So I think that's why grounding really, really helped me, because I was like, woo.
I have to try that now. I mean,
I'll send you information about it.
That would be amazing. And when you mention nutrient deficiencies, what type of deficiencies are we talking about?
Sure. So like B vitamin deficiencies, trace mineral deficiencies like magnesium, zinc, manganese. Those are some common ones that we see in our clinic.
I see. And, you know, one thing I noticed was like when I was taking supplements for my own deficiencies for nutrients, they weren't getting to the cell level. They were only absorbing like maybe in the blood, and otherwise they weren't absorbing. So how do you fix that?
So if there's overt gut infections going on, we totally bypass the oral route and we try to do creams so that it gets into your system that way. And then one is also to help your digestion. So you can do like acid and digestive enzymes to help bring that like fire back. But that's just temporarily until we get to like actually addressing the gut infection, if that's your issue.
That's great. Yeah, I know a lot of the women, they have like digestive issues, hormone imbalances, and probably a lot of sleep issues. And so they just don't know where to start with any of this stuff. And I think maybe since we're getting closer to the end of this call, you can sort of give them like a roadmap of
Sure.
how they can begin on their journey to better sleep.
Sure. So I would first spend some time just figuring out in your life, what are your stressors? Because if you don't know what your stressors are, it's going to be hard to really fix your sleep, because a lot of people will be like, oh, I'm going to rush to CBD and melatonin and that'll help me sleep, And it's like, well, that'll help you symptomatically, but it's not necessarily going to get to the root. So think about infections, think about sleep apnea, think about emotional stress, environmental stress. So figure out what your stressors are first. Okay. And then two, if you've been struggling for a long period of time, I would say go find a practitioner that you feel comfortable with, because you need to get to the root of it. It can be really hard to figure out what are your nutrient imbalances without testing. So you probably want to figure out what your nutritional status is, fix that foundation, then go on to the next thing where it's like, okay, keep a rhythm to your day, which is a lifestyle thing, because your body works on rhythm. And if you're always whacked out, it's never going to know what time to heal. So keep a rhythm, make sure you're not doing blue light and all that stuff late into the night, because you're just disrupting your sleep even more. And then once you figure out what your stressors are, just address them one by one. And then you should start to see stuff come back into balance.
I love that. And in terms of like your 3 key takeaways from all what we spoke about today, it's we covered everything from adaptogens.
We talked about it a lot.
Nutritional deficiencies, adrenals. What are your 3 biggest takeaways?
Don't ignore your symptoms. So don't push it to the side. Don't normalize it, because it's not normal. So you can feel healthier and happier. It will take work, but just don't push it to the side, because you're digging yourself a deeper hole, and there'll be more stuff that's going to come down the line if you don't address it now. Be selfish. So put up boundaries with people that might be emotionally toxic to you, or draining, or not supportive of your of you healing. Like, make sure who's in your environment is on your team. And then 3, keep a rhythm to your day.
I love that. Thank you so much for your
You're
time
welcome.
and being on the show today. And I would love to like have you back sometime. And if they
Absolutely.
want to like get in touch with you or want to go further with this, how can they do that? So
I'm Dr. A. Soorya on both Facebook and Instagram. So easy to find there. Swetha and I follow each other, so if you can't find me that way.
Yeah, you can go through my followers. I only follow like 100 people. So.
Yeah. I feel honored.
Yeah, I kind of went through a reinvention of my life and had to really, like you said, clean out my environment.
You will feel so much better when you do. And I think the thing is, healing is a journey. It's non-linear. So it's going to be up and down, but as long as your like trajectory is up, you're going to discover things about yourself along the way, which is great. Like, you will be, I think, that much more powerful in your own like being.
That's so true.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on.